Hello everyone, my name is Adam Blevins. I'm a percussion and drum set instructor with Mason Music, and today I'm going to walk you through how to set up a standard 5-piece drum set. So this is a source of frustration for a lot of new students and new parents alike. I remember when I got my first drum set, talked to my parents about it later, and they had a heck of a time getting this thing set up so it would be ready for me. So hopefully I'm going to make that process a little bit easier for parents that are new to setting up drum sets. This is one of the most complicated musical instruments, probably the most complicated to do the initial setup, but it's not that bad if you just know a few things. The first thing that you might notice is that I said we're going to be setting up a standard 5-piece drum set, but I have a whole lot more than 5 pieces that make up my drum set. The reason for that is when you count the pieces of a drum set, you only count drums. So in this instance, I have a bass drum, I have 3 tom-toms, or we usually just shorten these nowadays to toms, and a snare drum. So bass drum, 3 toms, and a snare drum. Those are going to be the 5 pieces that make up the core of our 5-piece drum set. Generally speaking, anything else that you add on to it, cowbells, wood blocks, cymbals, anything else that you add to it is going to be extra. They aren't counted in the pieces of the core drum set. But again, generally speaking, a 5-piece drum set consists of these 5 pieces, plus a hi-hat, ride cymbal, and a crash cymbal. Like I said, the hi-hat, crash cymbal, and ride cymbal aren't part of the core drum set, but generally I consider those part of what I refer to as a standard 5-piece drum set. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So when I'm putting together my drum set, I generally like to build it from the ground up. So I usually start with the bass drum. The main part of the bass drum that you want to be aware of is this leg, these legs on the side. There should be one on either side of the drum, and these are called the spur, the bass drum spur. And also watch out for the heads. This one, I took this head off of the drum. I'm using it on a different drum set right now, and I didn't have a spare head, so I had to take that one off. But generally, you'll have a drum head on this side. Usually it will have a hole in it, but not always. This is called the resonant head, because it's the head that resonates sound. The other head is called the batter head, because it's the one that gets battered. It's the one that's beaten with the bass drum beater or the mallet. This head is never played directly, it just resonates the sound. This is the head that you play. Sometimes this one is called the front head, but I usually call it the resonating head or the resonant head, because that takes all the ambiguity out of it. So on the bass drum spur, you have 2 wing nuts, basically screws. You have one. We unscrew that one. Also, you never want to unscrew anything all the way so that it comes out. Just unscrew it just enough so that it can move. And this one has a ratcheting mechanism, so I can only lock it in at certain points. And then you have this one, which controls a length or a height adjustment for the lower part of the spur. So what I'm just going to do is rotate this out to where it just barely meets the ground, and then tighten it back up. And you want to set it to where the bottom rim is just a little bit off of the ground. You also always want to set your drums up on carpet, if at all possible. If you don't have a carpeted area, you can use just a rug panel. I have a throw rug that I bought at Walmart for about $15. I think I've got 2 or 3 of them. One of them lives in my car, and I've got one of them stored with some of my other percussion gear. And I always take those rugs with me if I'm going to a gig, and if I don't know if I'm going to have carpet, I just put it on that cheap Walmart rug, and it works fantastic. You can set those up in the house, and they're great. But that'll keep your drum from skidding around. If you don't have a rug, then this spike won't have anything to grip onto, and it'll scratch your floor, and it'll also make the bass drum walk forward as you play it. So watch out for that. So, like I said, we're just going to make sure this is just long enough so that it barely touches the ground and lifts that front rim up a little bit. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side. There's an identical spur, so I'm just going to loosen that and put it down here. Now my bass drum spurs have a locking mechanism to where they can only go forward so far, which is about the perfect amount for me. Other drum sets will let them spin indefinitely, but you just want to have it down at a really shallow angle, like I said, just so that it barely lifts that off the ground. All right, and once you have the bass drum set up, we're going to go ahead and attach the pedal, and then we're going to move to the toms. All right, to attach the pedal, your pedal should have a clamping mechanism on it that will clamp to the rim of the batter head on the bass drum. And so I'm just going to, first of all, we'll make sure that this clamping mechanism is unscrewed. If you have an entry-level bass drum pedal, the screw might be underneath the pedal, but more expensive pedals have it on the side where it's difficult to manufacture, but it's a lot easier to attach. So let's make sure that's unscrewed. Again, not so much that the wing nut pops out, just enough that I can clamp it on. There we go, and then we'll screw it back up and just until it's tight enough that it'll stay on. There we go, and that's the bass drum pedal. All right, and the next thing that we're going to do is attach our toms to the bass drum. So the first thing that we'll need is this, which is the tom arm. And this is going to go into the top hole on the bass drum. So again, we're going to make sure that that wing nut is just loose enough that we can fit the tom arm in. And we're just going to push that down a few inches, and then we're going to tighten it back up. There is another piece on the tom arm, which is this. This is called a memory lock. If you move your drum set a lot, or if you're very particular about the exact height of your toms, then you can use memory locks. Cymbal stands sometimes have these as well. But if I loosen it up with my drum key, mine's a little stiff because I never use them, but I can put it down there and tighten it back up. So then the next time I take my tom arm out, when I put it back in, I can put it in at the exact same spot. But like I said, I rarely use these because I'm not that picky. I usually just kind of eyeball it. So let me raise that back up. And I'm going to go ahead and put both of my tom arms in here. Generally speaking, on a standard 5-piece drum set, both of your toms go up on the bass drum. There are a couple of other options, but I might explore those later, but we'll just leave it here for now. There we go. So once you have your tom arms connected, is when you can attach your toms. And again, we're going to loosen up our wing nut, slide it on, and then tighten that back up. And then same thing with our second tom. All right, and then we're going to lower our toms. I'm going to start with this one because it's a little bit deeper. I'm going to lower it. I like mine is about as low as I can get them, so I'm going to put it really low, but not so low that it touches the rim of the bass drum. That is very bad, so you want to make sure it stays clear of the rim. And I'm going to do the same thing with the other tom. There we go. And you want these to be about level with each other, so you want those to create kind of a solid surface, but tilted forward a little bit. Not a really sharp tilt, but just a little bit. There you go. I think that'll do for now. I might fine tune that a little bit when I get the rest of it set up. Next, we're going to attach our third tom, and there are a couple of different types. This is what I would call a hanging floor tom. These other two toms that we attached are called rack toms. This technically is a rack tom because we're going to attach it on a rack or on an arm, just like we did with our other toms. Very simply, just tighten up the wing nut, and that's good to go. There we go. Perfect. So most drum sets come with traditional floor toms. It's called a floor tom because it sits on the floor. And they will have these floor tom legs. I've already got this one connected, but I'll show you this other drum set. They're pretty easy. All you have to do is just slide that in and then tighten it up like that. And you want to do that with all three legs. There we go. Pretty simple. All right, the next thing we're going to do is set up our snare drum. So I have my snare drum stand. There are 3 or 4 main elements that we're going to worry about. The first thing is this one. So our bottom wing nut is going to control the legs of the stand. So you want to make sure those are out about halfway. a nice width. You don't want that to be all the way down. You don't want it to be too flat, but you don't want them to be too closed because then it'll throw off balance. So just about halfway down. And once you get your snare drum set up, you can test and make sure that there's enough of a bass there so that it won't fall over. This one is the height adjustment, and I've already got it set where I need it, so I'm not really going to move it, but that's something that you can adjust after your snare drum is set up. And then finally, we have the snare drum basket and the basket tilt. So I'm going to set it to where the tilt goes towards me or away from me. And I'm going to set it up to where it's tilted just a little bit towards me. So I thought that was a little low, but I've got a very deep snare drum, so that should be fine. When you put the snare drum on, be very careful that these rubber arms aren't touching the bottom head of the snare drum or the resonant head. So take extra concern to make sure that the snare drum fits inside the arms. If it doesn't fit, if it's too small, you can use this dial down here, this basket control, to make it either wider or more narrow. So for now, I'm going to put it just about all the way at the bottom. I'm going to set my snare drum in so I've got plenty of clearance on all sides, and then I'm going to tighten it up until it keeps a nice grip on my snare drum. Again, very careful to make sure that nothing's touching the bottom head. There we go. And then I'm going to put my snare drum, I like mine pretty close to the bass drum and my toms. Again, not so close that it touches that bass drum rim, but close enough that I can play it easily. There we go, and that's the snare drum. So that is all the drums. This technically is everything you need for a 5-piece drum set, but we're going to go ahead and set up the cymbals next. All right, we're going to start with the hi-hat, which is the trickiest of all the cymbals to set up. The main part of the hi-hat that we're going to worry about is this thing, which is called the clutch. Actually, I'm going to take a step backwards real quick because when you get your hi-hat stand, it might be closed up. Hi-hats are kind of tricky, but most of them you never have to touch. All we have really are the leg controls, just like the snare drum. And then we have a height control, again, just like the snare drum. And we have this piece, which is called the pull rod. I haven't taken this one out in a long time, and oh man, it's giving me a little bit of trouble. All right, there we go. So on this hi-hat stand, I can unscrew the pull rod. There we go. So that might be out when you get it. Mine actually has an attachment that blocks it from coming all the way out, which is a feature. You want that. But if you stick it down in the pole, you should feel it stop, and then you just screw it in until it won't go any further. I think. Oh, mine's having a little bit of trouble finding the thread. You gotta take a couple of tries to find the right spot. There we go, that's it. There we go. And the next thing to do is to slide the bottom hi-hat on. And the bottom hi-hat cymbal generally is a little bit heavier and a little bit thicker than the top hi-hat cymbal. And if you look at it, it'll probably tell you that it's the bottom. And this one says a custom bottom hi-hat. So we're gonna flip that upside down and slide it right on. And the top cymbal is the part that deals with the clutch, and this is where it can get a little bit tricky. So a clutch has a bottom screw, it has 2 pieces of felt, and then 2 more screws, and they're all on this one threaded screw attachment. So we're going to unscrew the bottom part, till that comes all the way off, and we're going to take off the bottom felt. And that's where we're going to attach our cymbal. You always want to make sure that every cymbal is between 2 pieces of felt. And that will extend the life of your cymbals. Cymbals can get very expensive, and it is very sad when they break. There you go, screw that back on. And then that goes on the top. Once that's on, in order to adjust it, I'm just going to put the pedal down about 2 or 3 inches. So if you notice the pull rod, it comes down just a couple of inches. I'm going to hold it there. Again, I'm pushing down on the pedal. I don't think you can see it on camera, but that's how I'm getting the pull rod to go down. Just push the pedal down a couple of inches, and then tighten this up, and then let go. And that's how you get your hi-hat set up. So a couple of things to watch out for. The main thing is you don't want to push this too far down. If you can do that, that'll happen. Very difficult to get a good sound out, so just a couple of inches. There we go, and that's our hi-hat. All right, next we're going to set up our crash cymbal. So I have my crash cymbal stand, and this has a wing nut on the top, followed by 2 pieces of felt. It's got a small piece of felt and then a thicker piece of felt. And this piece. If something goes missing on a cymbal stand, it is almost always this thing, which is one of the most important things. I don't know what this is called, but it's very, very important. The reason that's important is because it creates a soft barrier between your cymbal, which is made out of metal, and the stand, which is also made out of metal. And furthermore, this threaded screw is like a little tiny saw. And I'll show you why that's important in a moment. But we're going to have the plastic sleeve, the large felt, the cymbal goes on top of that. Be very careful when you put the cymbals on, because like I said, this thread is like a tiny saw, and that can eat away at the inside of your cymbal. So be very careful. If you hear it go rip, that's very, very bad. So bottom felt, cymbal, top felt, and then the wing nut. And you don't want to screw it down so far that your cymbal can't move. You still want to be able to have your cymbal move freely. If it's too restricted, that'll cause unnecessary stress on your cymbal, and it will make it crack a lot more easily. All right, and once we have our crash cymbal ready to go, we're going to set it right there above the hi-hat. And the crash cymbal, by the way, is going to be the lighter and thinner and probably smaller of the 2 non-hi-hat cymbals. So the ride cymbal is going to be a little bit heavier and thicker, and we're going to do that one right now. And I've already got my ride cymbal stand more or less in place. And just like the crash cymbal, this one I only have 1 felt. That top felt is nice, but it's not 100% necessary. You just want to be very, very careful to ensure that there is no metal touching other metal. And my plastic sleeve on this one keeps it from touching my wing nut, so we should be good there. There we go, and that's going to go on the right side of the drum set, kind of above and behind the middle tom. And I'll move back and give you a better view real quick so you can see exactly where that goes from the player's perspective. And there is our fully complete 5-piece drum set. The only part that we didn't talk about is the throne. This piece right here. This might look a lot like a stool, but it is a throne. I promise I'm not making that up. And whenever you get your drum set up, you always have to sit down and fine-tune things. So I like to make sure that my pedals are an equal distance from my body. And you also want to make sure that all of your surfaces can be hit easily, so you don't want your crash cymbal over your tom. You want it right between your hi-hat and your high tom. Same thing with your ride cymbal. You want to make sure it can be hit easily, but it isn't covering up your middle tom or your floor tom. And that is just about perfect. So I hope this has been informative, and I hope this helps you set up your drum sets at home. I hope it takes away some of the headache of getting that initial setup done. This is a process. Everybody has their own way of doing it. This is just how I like to set up my drum set. But as you go along, you'll find your own style and your own ways that you like doing things. And the more you do it, the easier it gets and the faster it gets. Repetition is the key. And that'll do it. We'll see you in lessons. Have a good one.